Listen, if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking that the property market is going to crash in 2024, think again. Just last year, economists were warning of a property market crash that was going to come at the tail end of the year, but it never happened. And they warned of this same exact prediction every year, but here we are after 15 months of growth. If you paid any attention to those headlines last year, you missed out on 10 to 15% of capital growth. And you're probably wondering right now if you should get in while things seem to have skyrocketed or wait for some sort of a correction to get in. Today, I want to go through all the data and understand what the predictions were last year and where we ended up and what the market's looking like in 2024. With this information, I hope you'll be able to finally kick that analysis paralysis and make a move that's going to inch you towards that financial independence that we're all working towards. Forecast for 2023 had the Australian housing market pegged to crash as the RBA continued to increase interest rates on the back of stubborn inflation. Looking back at this article as an example, chief economist at AMP Capital was forecasting prices to fall by up to 20%, with the bottom of the market occurring in September of 23. Australian home prices are likely to fall further as rate hikes continue to impact, resulting in a top to bottom fall of 15 to 20%. But with the prices predicted to bottom around September quarter, ahead of gains later in the year as RBA moves towards rate cuts. Now, if you've been following the market, you are probably just like me, waiting for those same rate cuts that they were talking about. And if you think about it, their analysis, it kind of makes sense. We had 5 interest rate rises in 23 on the back of 8 consecutive rate rises the year before. Let's peel back the layers and understand how the property market actually performed in 2023. According to this report by CoreLogic, the Australian home value surged 8.1% in 23. And we can see that Sydney grew around 11.1%, Melbourne a measly 3.1%, so it was actually below the rate of inflation, so not very good. Brisbane 13.1%, Adelaide 8.8%, and Perth led the charge at 15.2% throughout the year. We further read on and see that such diversity across the capital cities can be broadly attributed to factors relating to demand and supply. No shit. That's Econ 101, right? In Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane, housing affordability challenges haven't been as pressing relative to the larger cities, and advertised supply levels have remained persistently and substantially below average. I think this is right on the money. I saw last year that the affordable ends of the market were the ones that were absolutely skyrocketing, and that it was sort of that thinking of, your borrowing capacity to come down a bit. What can you actually go out there and afford? So a lot of investors and a lot of first home buyers who were entering the market were coming in at that lower price bracket. If you had listened to all the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and the doubt, you probably sat on the sidelines and you didn't make a move. Now, on a 450K investment in Perth, that was 68.4K in growth that you could have seen. Now let's see what's actually happening on the ground in 2024, where the Australian housing crisis is painted across every single headline that we see. For the month of April, we see that housing values rose 0.6% as low supply trumps high interest rates and inflation. April's increase takes the current growth cycle into its 15th month of growth, with housing values up 11.1% or approximately 78 grand since the trough in January last year. Just in the month of April, we saw Sydney up 0.4%, Melbourne down 0.1%, Brisbane up 0.9%, Adelaide up 1.3%, and Perth continuing its boom at 2% growth. We read on further that we aren't seeing any signs of heat coming out of the Perth housing market just yet. In fact, the quarterly pace of growth at 6% is approaching the cyclical highs seen during the pandemic when interest rates were at rock bottom. Now, the reason for this performance is that the Australian property market is in a crisis. You've seen it across all the headlines, but just how bad is it? Let's see what the data really says about this. According to this article, a survey from the Everybody Home campaign shows 2/3 of Aussies are experiencing housing stress, which means that a person is spending more than 30% of their take-home pay on housing. To make matters worse, when you separate the tenants out of this data, they found that 82% of them were spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So we can see that it's disproportionately affecting the tenants. Now, one of the cited reasons for the housing crisis is immigration. Now, no matter where you stand on this issue, let's see what the data says. We can see that migration rose by 1/3 last year to lift Australia's population by a record 659K. The record net annual increase of almost 550K comes despite the Albanese government's expectation to bring migration down from 510k to 375k a year by June 2024. Now, to further cement the perfect storm of the Australian housing crisis, we can see in this article that Australia's housing affordability crisis will continue to worsen with a significant shortfall in supply. According to the government's own expert council, in its very first State of Housing System report, the National Housing Supply and Affordability Council described Labor's target of building 1.2 million new homes over 5 years as suitably ambitious because it projects 943k will be built in that time. It's Econ 101, right? Supply and demand. We can see here the narrative that's being shaped is we're trying to lessen immigration, but it's still too high. We want to build more houses, but we're still not building enough. So we're seeing that the housing crisis is going to stick around for a little bit longer. It's safe to say that in an already critical market, an increase in population as well as an inability to meet our targets for supply of property is going to mean that property prices are going to continue to grow and rents are going to continue to grow, and we'll continue to see headlines about the Australian housing crisis. And on top of that, it means that it's going to get harder and harder to get into the market. Now, on this channel, I want to help you get ahead. I believe that the biggest investment that you can make is up here. It's the insights, the information, the data that's going to allow you to build that growth mindset, to take each step towards that financial freedom, that financial independence that we're all talking about.